The stars burned cold and distant as Admiral Daniel Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute. He watched the tactical display with tired eyes. The war against the swarm had lasted 7 long years, and today it would finally end. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had fought too many battles to feel excitement anymore. They only wanted it to be over. The year was 2847, and humanity had spent 3 centuries climbing its way into the stars. They had discovered they were not alone in the universe. 12 alien species had formed the Galactic Confederation thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. When humanity finally reached the stars, the Confederation watched them with cautious eyes. Humans were young and ambitious. They learned fast and they never stopped pushing forward. After 50 years of proving themselves, humanity earned a seat at the great table of galactic civilization. Daniel had given his entire life to this moment. He had fought in 6 major campaigns and lost count of the smaller ones. His hair had turned, and his hands carried scars from battles he tried not to remember. But he believed in the mission. He believed that humanity had found true allies among the stars. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Monroe approached him with a data pad in her hands. She was young, but she had proven herself in combat many times. Daniel trusted her completely. "The fleets are in position," she reported. "They are ready to begin the final assault on your command." Daniel nodded slowly. There were tall and graceful beings with silver skin and 4 arms. There were reptilian creatures with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Both species had fought alongside humanity for years. They had bled together. They had buried their dead together. Daniel considered their admirals to be brothers in arms. "Signal the fleet," Daniel said. "All ships advance. Today we end this war." The human fleet moved forward like a great wave of steel and light. Behind them, the ships held position. Daniel assumed they would follow once they engaged. That was the plan they had agreed upon. The swarm emerged from the asteroid field ahead. Their ships were dark and twisted things that seemed grown rather than built. Millions of warriors crewed those vessels, and they knew only hunger and conquest. They had destroyed 17 civilizations before the Confederation united against them. Daniel watched the enemy approach on his display. His heart beat steady in his chest. He had faced death many times and he did not fear it. He only feared failing the people who depended on him. "All batteries open fire," he commanded. The Resolute shook as its weapons unleashed fury upon the enemy. Across the fleet, thousands of human ships did the same. The void filled with beams of energy and streams of missiles. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The battle had begun. Then Lisa Monroe spoke words that changed everything. "Admiral, the fleets are moving." Daniel felt relief for a moment. Their allies had finally joined the fight. But something in Lisa's voice made him turn to look at her face. She had gone pale and her hands trembled as she stared at her display. "They are targeting us," she whispered. Daniel did not have time to respond. The first shots from the fleet struck the Resolute and the ship screamed around him. Consoles exploded. Officers died at their stations. The lights flickered and alarms filled the air with their terrible sound. Across the human fleet, the same nightmare unfolded. Ships that had fought beside each other for years now turned their weapons on their human allies. The humans were caught between the ahead and their former friends behind. They had nowhere to run and no time to understand what was happening. Daniel grabbed his command chair to keep from falling as the ship shook again. Through the viewport he watched a human carrier break apart under fire. Thousands of souls vanished in an instant. His people, his responsibility. "Why?" he said to no one. The word came out broken and hollow. On Earth, Ambassador Pierce received the news in his office at the Confederation Embassy. He had spent 20 years building bridges between humanity and the other species. He had believed that patience and goodwill could overcome any difference. The message on his screen shattered that belief forever. The Galactic Council had voted 3 days ago in a secret session. All 12 alien species had agreed. Humanity was too dangerous to exist. They grew too fast. They adapted too quickly. They asked too many questions and challenged too many traditions. In another 1,000 years, they might dominate the entire galaxy. The Confederation had decided to end that possibility while they still could. Read the words on his screen 3 times before he could accept they were real. The war against the had been a trap from the beginning. It was designed to weaken human military strength before the final blow, and now that blow had fallen. He looked out his window at the sky above Earth. Somewhere up there his people were dying. He could do nothing to save them. The bombardment of Earth began 6 hours later. Warships appeared in orbit and rained fire upon the planet that had given birth to humanity. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years burned in minutes. Billions of people died without ever knowing why. Across 17 star systems, human colonies faced the same fate. The aliens were thorough and efficient. They had planned this for years. They knew where every human settlement was located, and they struck them all at once. Daniel Cole survived the Battle of Nexus Prime. His ship was crippled, and most of his crew was dead, but he managed to escape into the darkness between stars. He gathered what survivors he could find and ran for the deepest shadows of the galaxy. Lisa Monroe survived beside him. She had dragged wounded sailors to escape pods with her own hands while the Resolute burned around them. Her uniform was stained with blood that was not her own. Pierce escaped Earth on a refugee transport just before the final bombardment reduced his city to glass. He carried nothing but the clothes on his back and a burning anger in his heart. Across the galaxy, small groups of humans fled and hid and refused to die. The Confederation celebrated their victory and declared humanity extinct. They returned to their comfortable lives and tried to forget what they had done. But 47 million humans still drew breath. They had lost their homes, their families, and their faith in the universe. They had nothing left except each other and a hatred that burned hotter than any star. The galaxy had tried to kill humanity. It had failed, and one day it would learn the price of that failure. 5 years passed in darkness and silence. The galaxy moved on with its business, and humanity became nothing more than a cautionary tale. Parents told their children about the ambitious species that had reached too high and paid the price. Historians wrote books about the necessary purge that had saved galactic civilization. The Confederation patted itself on the back and pretended its hands were clean. Deep within an asteroid field at the edge of known space, humanity refused to become a memory. Generals stood in the command center of their hidden base. The facility had been carved out of a dead moon called Titan's Shadow. It was cold and dark and barely large enough to hold the survivors. But it was theirs, and the aliens had not found it. Was a short woman with iron hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had been a colonel when the betrayal happened. Every officer above her rank had died in the first hours of the attack. Command had fallen to her by default, and she had carried that weight for 5 years without complaint. Around her, screens displayed information from across the galaxy. Sensor probes hidden in asteroid belts and abandoned stations fed data back to Titan's Shadow. Knew the position of every major alien fleet. She knew their patrol routes and their communication frequencies. She knew their weaknesses even if they did not know them themselves. A door opened behind her and Dr. Samuel Hayes entered the room. He was a thin man with messy brown hair and dark circles under his eyes. He rarely slept anymore. There was too much work to do. "The new engine design is ready for testing," Samuel said. "If it works the way I think it will, our ships will be 3 times faster than anything the Confederation has." Nodded but did not smile. Good news was dangerous. It made people hope, and hope could make them careless. "What about the weapons?" she asked. Samuel handed her a data pad filled with technical specifications. She understood perhaps 1 word in 10, but she trusted his judgment completely. We have combined their shield technology with our own innovations, he explained. The result is an adaptive defense system that learns from every attack. Hit it with the same weapon twice, and it becomes immune. Their fleets will burn themselves out trying to break through. Studied the data pad for a long moment. How long until we can equip the fleet? 6 months, Samuel replied. Maybe less if I push the teams harder. Push them, said. We have waited long enough. In another section of the base, Captain trained the next generation of soldiers. The gymnasium was cold and the equipment was old, but the people who used it burned with purpose. They were sons and daughters of the survivors. They had grown up on stories of the betrayal. They had been raised on hatred, and they wore it like armor. Watched a group of young recruits practice hand-to-hand combat. They moved with speed and precision that would have impressed any drill instructor. These were not soft children who had grown up in peace. These were wolves raised in the darkness, hungry for the day they could hunt. A young woman named Grace Palmer approached after the training session ended. She was 19 years old with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had earned that scar in a skirmish with alien scavengers 2 years ago. When do we fight? She asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with impatience. Understood her frustration. He felt it himself every day, but he had learned to control it, and he needed her to learn the same lesson. We fight when we are ready, he said. Not before. Rush into battle too soon and we all die for nothing. Wait until the moment is right and we can make them pay for every life they took. Grace nodded slowly. She did not like the answer, but she accepted it. Across the base, Admiral Daniel Cole worked in the Strategic Planning Center. He had aged 20 years in the past 5. His hands shook sometimes, and his dreams were filled with the faces of dead friends. But his mind remained sharp, and his determination never wavered. Lisa Monroe sat beside him, studying star charts and fleet dispositions. She had risen to the rank of Commodore through skill and dedication. Daniel trusted her with his life and with the lives of everyone under his command. They have reduced their border patrols, Lisa noted. They believe the threat is gone. Daniel traced a line across the star chart with his finger. They grew comfortable, fat and lazy on the piece they stole from our graves. Lisa looked at him with concern in her eyes. She had served with him long enough to recognize the darkness in his voice. The betrayal had wounded him in ways that would never fully heal. We will make them uncomfortable again, she said quietly. Daniel nodded and returned his attention to the charts. Somewhere out there, the species that had murdered billions of his people went about their lives without fear or guilt. That would change. He would make sure of it. Ambassador Pierce handled a different kind of mission. He traveled between the scattered human settlements in a small ship that looked like garbage from the outside. He carried messages and supplies and hope. He reminded people that they were still one species, still one family, still fighting for the same cause. His latest stop was a mining station hidden inside a comet. 37 humans lived there, extracting water and minerals to send back to Titan's shadow. They were tired and lonely, and they had begun to lose faith. Gathered them in their small common area, and spoke to them with passion he did not have to fake. I know it is hard, he said. I know you feel forgotten out here in the dark, but everything you do matters. Every piece of ice you collect, every gram of metal you mine, it all feeds the machine that will carry us home. The aliens think we are extinct. That is our greatest weapon. When we finally strike, they will learn that humanity does not die so easily. The miners listened to his words, and something changed in their eyes. They sat up. They looked at each other with renewed purpose. Had given them what they needed most. He had given them a reason to keep going. Back at Titan's shadow, General reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Strange things were happening across the galaxy. Ships vanished without trace. Listening posts went silent. Supply convoys disappeared into the void. The Confederation blamed pirates and remnants. They were wrong. Those missing ships and stations were the work of Commander Porter and her Ghost Fleet. They were testing their new technology and eliminating isolated targets that would not be missed. Allowed herself a small smile as she read the reports. The silence was almost over. 5 years of hiding and building and planning would soon bear fruit. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. It had grown comfortable in its victory. That comfort would be its doom. The attack came on a beautiful morning on the of Aura Prime. The sky was purple and 3 moons hung low on the horizon. Citizens walked through crystal towers and floating gardens without any sense of fear. Their world had known peace for generations. War was something that happened far away to lesser species. Then the orbital defense platforms began to explode. Commander Porter watched from the bridge of her invisible ship as chaos erupted below. The Ghost Fleet had arrived in perfect silence. Their cloaking technology was so advanced that even the most sensitive sensors detected nothing. The enemy had no idea they were under attack until their defenses started dying. Target the military installations, ordered. Leave the civilian areas untouched. Her crew obeyed without hesitation. Precision strikes rained down from empty sky. Barracks and weapons, factories and command centers vanished in pillars of fire. The military scrambled to respond, but they could not fight what they could not see. In exactly 14 minutes, the third most powerful species in the galaxy lost control of their own. Opened a communication channel and broadcast her message to every screen on the planet. Her face appeared before billions of terrified. She spoke in their language, words she had practiced for years just for this moment. You thought extinction would silence us. You were wrong. The transmission ended, and the Ghost Fleet vanished back into the void. They left behind a world in shock and a message that would echo across the stars. At the same moment, similar attacks struck targets across the galaxy. They lost their 3 largest shipyards in synchronized explosions. The Galactic Council Station suffered a complete power failure that trapped thousands of delegates in darkness for 3 terrifying days. When the lights finally returned, they found a single word burned into every screen in every language: remember. Admiral Daniel Cole coordinated the attacks from the war room at Titan's Shadow. He stood before a massive holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated successful strikes. Green markers showed ships returning safely to hidden bases. The plan was working perfectly. Lisa Monroe stood beside him with tears in her eyes. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of fierce joy. After 5 years of waiting, humanity had finally announced its survival to the universe. The aliens are panicking, she reported. Their communication networks are flooded with confused reports. They have no idea what is happening. Daniel nodded slowly. Let them panic. Let them taste the fear they forced upon us. Ambassador Pierce appeared on every broadcast channel in the galaxy 3 hours after the attacks. He stood before a restored flag of Earth, the same flag that had flown over the ruins of the old United Nations building. His face was calm and his voice was steady. To the species of the former Galactic Confederation, he began, you believed that humanity was extinct. You celebrated our death and returned to your comfortable lives. You were wrong on both counts. He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. 47 million humans survived your betrayal. We have spent 5 years preparing for this moment. We have studied your technology and improved upon it. We have mapped your networks and planted ourselves inside your systems. We know your secrets better than you know them yourselves. Leaned forward slightly, his eyes hard as stone. You voted to exterminate us. Every species, every council member, every admiral who fired on our ships, every politician who signed the order. We remember all of you, and we are coming. The broadcast ended and the galaxy descended into chaos. The Emperor demanded answers from his military leaders. They had none to give. The High Council retreated to their bunker and doubled their guard forces. It did not make them feel safe. Dr. Samuel Hayes unleashed the second phase of his plan. For years, his hackers had infiltrated alien computer systems. They had planted dormant programs in military networks, financial systems, and communication grids. Now those programs woke up. Across the galaxy, alien weapons began to malfunction. Targeting systems gave false readings. Shield generators flickered at random moments. Navigation computers plotted courses that led ships in circles. The technology that the Confederation had trusted for suddenly became unreliable. General watched the reports flow in with grim satisfaction. The enemy was blind and confused and afraid. That was exactly where she wanted them. She opened a channel to all human commanders and spoke clearly. Phase 2 is complete. All fleets prepare for Phase 3. We have shown them we are alive. Now we show them what that means. Captain led the first ground assault on a military base. His soldiers moved like shadows through the facility, eliminating guards before they could raise an alarm. They had not fought a ground war in centuries. They had forgotten how terrifying humans could be up close. Grace Palmer fought beside him with controlled fury. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Every swing of her blade and every shot from her weapon carried the weight of billions of lost souls. They captured the base in 2 hours without losing a single soldier, stood among the defeated officers and looked into their eyes. He saw fear there, real, genuine fear. It satisfied something dark and hungry inside him. "You killed our world," he said quietly. "Remember that when you wonder why this is happening to you." The Confederation attempted to organize a unified response, but Dr. Samuel Hayes made that impossible. Every time their admirals tried to coordinate, their communications failed. Every time they gathered their fleets, their sensors showed human ships that were not really there. They jumped at shadows and exhausted themselves chasing ghosts. Meanwhile, the real human fleets positioned themselves for the next phase. They were patient. They had waited 5 years. They could wait a few more weeks while the enemy tore itself apart. Admiral Daniel Cole received a message from a diplomat requesting a meeting. The alien begged for peace talks, for a chance to explain, for mercy. Daniel read the message 3 times before deleting it. There would be no mercy. There would be no negotiation. There would only be justice. Commander Porter launched another raid, this time against a Confederation supply depot. Her ships appeared from nowhere, destroyed everything of value, and vanished before the enemy could respond. She left one survivor to carry a message back to his masters. "Tell them we are everywhere. Tell them we see everything. Tell them there is nowhere to hide." The survivor delivered the message. The Confederation heard it, and for the first time since they had voted to destroy humanity, they understood what they had truly awakened. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunt had only just begun. What followed was not a war, it was a reckoning. General sat in her command center and directed the campaign with cold precision. She did not hate the aliens. Hatred required emotion, and she had burned through her emotions years ago. What remained was something colder and more dangerous: purpose. Every species that had voted for human extinction received the same message: surrender unconditionally or face the consequences. Some species tried to negotiate, rejected every offer. Some species tried to flee. Human ships were waiting for them at every possible destination. Some species tried to fight. They chose to fight. Their High Council believed they could still win. They had more ships than humanity. They had more soldiers. They had ruled their sector of space for 8,000 years, and they refused to bow to a species they had tried to erase from existence. Captain led the assault on there. His fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above their capital city. The defense fleet moved to intercept, but their weapons refused to fire. Dr. Samuel Hayes had disabled them remotely. Watched the enemy ships drift helplessly through space. Part of him felt something that might have been pity. Then he remembered the billions who had died on Earth. He remembered the children who burned in their beds while they celebrated victory. The pity died quickly. All ships, he ordered, begin bombardment of military targets. The capital burned for 3 days, made certain that only military installations were destroyed. Civilians were evacuated before strikes occurred. Hospitals and schools were left untouched. Humanity would not become the monsters they were fighting. But the military was erased completely. Their proud warrior caste was reduced to prisoners in camps. Their weapons were melted down and their warships were taken as trophies. In 6 months, an empire that had stood fell to its knees. The High Council was captured and brought before a tribunal. Admiral Daniel Cole presided over the trial himself. He listened to their excuses and their justifications. They claimed they had no choice. They claimed they were protecting their people. They claimed humanity would have done the same in their position. Daniel let them speak until they ran out of words. Then he delivered his verdict. You chose to murder billions of innocent people because you feared what we might become. That fear was your choice. This judgment is mine. The council members were sentenced to life imprisonment on a barren moon, where they would have nothing but time to contemplate what they had done. Vice Admiral Lisa Monroe led the fleet that surrounded the. She had risen through the ranks during the campaign, earning her position through skill and determination. Now she commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled. Emperor requested an audience with her. He was ancient by standards, having ruled for over 600 years. He had voted for human extinction with the same casual indifference he might have used to approve a budget report. Lisa agreed to meet him aboard a neutral station. She wore her dress uniform and carried no weapons. She did not need them. The entire empire was already beaten. This meeting was just a formality. The emperor tried to bargain. He offered territory and resources and technology. He offered to make humanity the senior partner in a new alliance. He offered everything except the one thing Lisa wanted. I will give you anything, said. Name your price. Lisa looked at him for a long moment before responding. My price is justice. Abdicate your throne. Submit to trial for crimes against humanity. Accept whatever sentence is given. Do this and your people will survive. Refuse and I will reduce every world to ash. Stared at her with his 4 silver eyes. He was not used to being given ultimatums. He was not used to fear. But he saw something in Lisa's face that convinced him she was not bluffing. The empire surrendered 3 days later. One by one, the other species followed. Some surrendered immediately when they saw what had happened to the ant. Others held out for weeks or months before accepting the inevitable. A few remote civilizations tried to hide in the outer reaches of the galaxy. Commander Porter hunted them down with patient efficiency. Her ghost fleet found every hidden base and secret colony. There was nowhere in the galaxy that humanity could not reach. Ambassador Pierce established the framework for the new galactic order. He was not cruel, but he was thorough. Every species that had participated in the betrayal would answer for its actions. Leaders would face trial. Militaries would be disbanded. The structures that had enabled genocide would be torn down and replaced. General oversaw the military occupation of 12 former Confederation worlds. She deployed human forces to maintain order and prevent resistance. Her soldiers were disciplined and professional. They did not loot or abuse civilians. They simply ensured that humanity's will was obeyed. Dr. Samuel Hayes presented his greatest achievement during a private meeting. He showed her designs for a network of automated defense platforms that could be deployed across the entire galaxy. Any species that attempted to challenge human authority would face immediate retaliation from weapons they could not detect or destroy. This will ensure our security forever, Samuel explained. No one will be able to threaten us again. Studied the designs carefully. The system was elegant and terrifying. It would make humanity untouchable. "Build it," she said. Admiral Daniel Cole addressed the survivors of the human fleet after the final surrender was accepted. They gathered in the great hall of what had once been the Galactic Council Station. Thousands of soldiers and officers who had fought and bled and lost friends stood together in silence. Daniel looked at their faces and saw exhaustion and grief and fierce pride. They had accomplished the impossible. They had risen from the ashes of genocide and conquered the galaxy that had tried to destroy them. "We have won," Daniel said simply, "but victory is not an ending. It is a beginning. Now we must decide what kind of rulers we will be. Will we become the monsters they feared? Will we prove them right about us? Or will we build something better than the civilization that betrayed us?" The hall was silent as his words sank in. Every person there understood the weight of what they had done and what lay ahead. The Galactic Confederation was dissolved that same day. In its place, the human imperium was declared. Humanity would rule the galaxy and every other species would answer to them. The question that remained was what humanity would do with its power. 10 years had passed since the betrayal. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible to anyone who had lived in the old order. Where 12 species had once ruled together, humanity now stood alone at the top. The human imperium stretched across every corner of known space, and its word was law. Admiral Daniel Cole served as the first High Chancellor of the Imperium. He governed from a massive space station called New Earth that had been built in the exact location where old Earth once orbited its sun. The original planet was gone, reduced to a field of irradiated debris by the bombardment. But humanity had refused to abandon the sacred coordinates of their birthplace. Daniel sat in his office and looked out at the stars. He was old now. His hair was completely white and his body ached from decades of war and stress. But his mind remained sharp and his commitment to his people never wavered. A chime announced a visitor. General entered and took a seat across from his desk. She had aged as well, but she carried her years with dignity. As Minister of Defense, she commanded the military forces that kept the galaxy in order. "The integration programs are proceeding well," reported. "Several alien species have requested permission to serve in auxiliary units alongside our forces." Daniel raised an eyebrow. He had not expected this development so soon. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Considered the question carefully before responding. "I think we should allow it. We cannot rule forever through fear alone. Eventually, we must build something that includes them, even if they remain junior partners. Otherwise, we are simply waiting for the next rebellion." Daniel nodded slowly, had always been practical. That was why he trusted her judgment. "Make it happen," he said, "but carefully. We cannot forget what they did." Rose and saluted before leaving. She had work to do. Ambassador Pierce had established the Truth and Memory Commission in the early days of the Imperium. Its purpose was simple but essential. Every generation, human and alien alike, would learn the full history of the betrayal. They would understand what had happened and why. Forgetting would only doom them to repeat the same mistakes. Traveled constantly, visiting schools and universities across the galaxy. He showed recordings of the bombardment of Earth. He displayed lists of the dead, each name a reminder of the cost of betrayal. He spoke to young aliens who had been born after the conquest and had no memory of the old order. Some of them asked why humanity did not simply exterminate the species that had attacked them. Always gave the same answer. "Because we are better than that. Because revenge without limit becomes evil. Because we want to build a future, not just punish the past." Not everyone agreed with his approach. Some humans believed the aliens should suffer more. Some aliens believed humanity was too harsh. Accepted criticism from both sides as proof that he was walking the right path. Dr. Samuel Hayes continued his research in a vast laboratory complex orbiting a distant star. He had pushed the boundaries of science further than anyone in galactic history. His inventions had given humanity its victory. Now he focused on what came next. His latest project was a terraforming system that could restore dead worlds to life. If it worked, humanity could rebuild Earth itself. The debris field could be gathered and reformed into a new planet. The oceans could flow again. The forests could grow again. Samuel worked on this project with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He had helped humanity take the galaxy. Now he wanted to give them back their home. Captain had retired to a quiet colony world far from the centers of power. He lived in a small house near a forest and spent his days in peaceful solitude. But peace did not come easily to him. His dreams were still filled with the battles he had fought and the enemies he had killed. Young soldiers sometimes came to visit him, seeking wisdom from the hero of the conquest. Received them patiently and listened to their questions. "How do you live with what we did?" one young officer asked him. Thought about the question for a long time before answering. "You remember that we had no choice. They tried to kill us all. We did what was necessary to survive. But you also remember that power without purpose becomes tyranny. We must be better than those who betrayed us. We must build something worth the blood we spilled to create it." The young officer nodded and thanked him before leaving, watched him go and hoped his words would help. Vice Admiral Lisa Monroe had taken command of the exploration fleet. She led expeditions beyond known space, seeking new worlds and new possibilities. The old maps ended at the borders of the former Confederation. Lisa intended to extend them far beyond. Her flagship, the Redemption, traveled further than any human vessel had gone before. She discovered new star systems and new planets. Some were barren rocks, others teemed with life that had never encountered intelligent beings. Lisa stood on the bridge and watched an alien sunrise on a world no human had ever visited. The sky was orange and two small moons hung above the horizon. It was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache. "This is why we survived," she said quietly to herself. "Not just for revenge, for this, for the chance to see what no one has seen before." Back on New Earth, High Chancellor Daniel Cole prepared to address the Imperium. The anniversary of the betrayal was approaching, and he had been asked to speak at the memorial ceremony. He had thought about what to say for weeks. When the day came, he stood before a vast crowd of humans and aliens. Behind him, a massive monument listed the names of every human who had died in the betrayal. It stretched so high that its top was lost in the clouds. Daniel spoke without notes, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. "We gather here to remember the worlds we lost, to remember the people we loved, to remember the moment when the galaxy decided we did not deserve to exist." He paused and looked out at the faces before him. "They were wrong about us. We proved that with our survival. We proved that with our victory. But the true proof lies in what we do next. We can rule through fear and hatred forever, or we can build something worthy of those we lost." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "I choose to build. I choose to believe that the best of humanity did not die with Earth. I choose to believe that we can create a future where our children do not grow up knowing only war." The crowd listened in respectful silence. Some wept, others nodded in agreement. A few remained skeptical, their wounds too fresh to heal. Daniel finished his speech with words that would be carved into the monument. "They tried to destroy us. They failed. Now we must prove that we deserve to survive." The ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed. Daniel returned to his office and sat alone with his thoughts. The galaxy watched humanity with a mixture of fear and hope. Some whispered of rebellion, others spoke of integration. The future remained uncertain. But Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Humanity had been betrayed and nearly destroyed. They had risen from the ashes and seized the stars. Now they faced the greatest challenge of all. They had to prove that they were worthy of their victory. They had to build something that honored the dead and gave hope to the living. They had to become the civilization they had always dreamed of being. The galaxy belonged to humanity now. What they made of it would determine the fate of 1 trillion souls. And somewhere in the void between stars, the scattered descendants of the human race looked to the future with hard eyes and hopeful hearts. They had survived the impossible. They had conquered the unconquerable. Now they would build the unimaginable. The story of humanity was far from over. It was only beginning.